The Cows, Gus T Renegade, and Justice in for another program to share constructive information on what racism is and how it works. Thank you everyone for tuning into the broadcast. I hope you're not wasting your time. We have way too many problems to solve for non-white people to be wasting time listening to the program if you're not getting constructive information. I said one of the things that I'm attempting to do in making sure I'm being efficient with my use of time, if I'm watching something on television, I want to make sure I'm watching documentaries, films where I'm actually learning something and not just in front of the television for entertainment purposes, always trying to learn. And our guest for the day's program, fantastic documentary film. I saw it some years ago when I was a little bit more confused about racism. But seeing this film really helped clear up some of that confusion and seeing how black people were treated worldwide. Not just, thinking about racism in terms of, oh, this is just a problem down south or this is just a problem in Mississippi, but worldwide, even in Australia, racism is a big problem. Our guest, she is the director and writer of the documentary film, co-writer, documentary film, Black Soldier Blues. The film came out in 2005. Extraordinary footage documenting black veterans during World War II that were stationed in the area of the world known as Australia. Lots of interesting information. You get to see quite a few veterans some 60 years later talking about their experiences, some of the white residents in Australia, some of the white officers, some of the black troops. Just really great information, and pleasure to have her on the program. Joining us live from Australia, our guest, Nicole McCuaig. Ms. McCuaig, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello. Please call me Nicole, Gus.
Will do. Good, I guess for you, good morning. It's Saturday morning.
Good morning. It is. I'm at the television station I work at, so I'm hoping there's not too many interruptions from people in and about the station, but it seems pretty quiet at the moment.
Okay. Wow. Incredible film. I hope folks will take the time to check it out. Again, the title is Black Soldier Blues. If you would like to share anything with our listeners about who you are, the work that you do, that you think would be relevant to going forward talking about this film.
Sure. I'm a documentary producer in Australia. I work for a commercial network over here, and I currently make 1-hour documentaries about a wide range of subjects. Prior to my work at the network I'm at the moment, I was an independent director, so I worked on also documentaries. I've always been a documentary maker, and they were longer standing projects, so a lot of time in development, a lot of research, and this led to the privilege of Black Soldier Blues, which was a project that came at a particularly apt time for me because I had just finished interviewing 100 war veterans from Australia, Australian veterans, for a project that was happening over here to archive our veterans' stories. So over the course of a few months, I interviewed 100 men, and the interviews would sometimes go for between 8 and 10 hours. So not only did I learn quite a bit about various theatres of war, I learnt and developed some skills in hearing war stories and allowing people to, talk freely about those war experiences, from the harrowing experiences to, the sometimes funny stories. So by the time Black Soldier Blues came to me, it came from Veronica Fury, who you mentioned. There was a co-writer. She was a co-writer and a producer. We have quite a huge team on the project. She came to me and she was studying the history of jazz music in Brisbane, the city that I live in, and had talked to an old Australian veteran who said that in the war years in Brisbane, the the black soldiers were placed in the inner city area of Brisbane and had this fantastic club called the Dr. Carver Club. And he would lie to the MPs. He wasn't supposed to go in there. He would lie to them to get in and hear this amazing music. So this is kind of where the story came from. But from there, we then did quite a lot of research and found some pretty important books that were written about the African American soldiers in Australia in the Second World War, their relationship with the Australian people. And then after doing that research, we were really fortunate enough to be in contact with a man called Benny J. McRae, who's a military historian, black military historian, and he put us in contact with the most amazing men. And it was just, it really came from their stories. The documentary changed quite a bit because their stories were so powerful.
Wow. I have a question about that, but before I ask my question,
that was a long intro.
It was very constructive, very constructive.
Oh, good.
Yeah, when the topic of racism comes up, people always say, "I don't think I'll have 2 hours worth of material." It never seems to be a problem.
Right, of course.
Well, I guess before I ask my question about your introduction, you are a white woman, is that correct?
Yes, I am a white woman.
Okay. This program, the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system that is dominated by racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms as synonyms, and I have the same definition for both terms. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that is an accurate definition?
Yes, I do. And yes, I do. I have been upset by this concept really my whole life, I think. It's very upsetting.
Wow, that is stunning. We almost never have a white person provide that much clarity. Just yes and yes. It's wow, that is stunning. Alrighty, my question about your introduction was how did what the black veterans that you met, how did what they shared change what you originally had planned for the documentary?
I think initially we set out with our own preconceived ideas about what the black veterans experienced in Australia. So because we were going on largely evidence or experiences from white people, we had no real idea what the experience was for the guys on the ground. You know, they hadn't been documented. And they said it themselves when we were interviewing quite a large group of them in Ohio at one point. They said, we've never told each other these stories and listened to our own stories, let alone, you know, been able to tell them to someone else. And it was really, really amazing to have the privilege of doing that. I've said that a number of times, sorry to repeat myself, but it really was. And, you know, I think that what changed was that they brought to this whole story humour and grace and, you know, the terrible experiences prior to the war of experiencing racism in their own towns, and then having this wild adventure overseas. Some of it fantastic. Some of the relationships they built with people overseas were really pivotal for them, I think, coming home, and then their experiences when they got back on home soil and were again, you know, treated really appallingly. So I think the personal stuff was what really changed the tone of the documentary. I knew when we had done those interviews in Ohio, I knew that we had a story that was not of our telling. It really was from those men. So it changed the doco completely.
Wow. Okay. Since this is focused on victims of white supremacy who reside in the States, had you done any projects focusing on racism, white supremacy in Australia before you did Black Soldier Blues?
Yes, I had. I'd done a couple of projects with Aboriginal communities in Australia, and since Black Soldier Blues, I've done a couple of projects as well. So various but I wouldn't say it was my driving subject. I think my driving goal and passion is to find stories from people and give them a platform to do that, which is kind of what you do too.
Yep, pretty close. Pretty close. Okay. I guess you kind of already alluded to this, but I just want to make sure. Is the information about the black soldiers and their experience in Australia, is this common knowledge? Did you know about any of this? You kind of already alluded to this, but...
I didn't really know about it at all. I discovered some of these stories while I was interviewing white veterans, and I was appalled at some of the stories that I heard from white veterans that they had witnessed men being killed, Black American men being treated really awfully. So that was my introduction to the subject, and I was really appalled by it as well. One man I interviewed who does appear in the documentary is a white Australian war veteran of particular credibility in Australia. He was awarded the VC, which is the highest military honour in Australia. And I was really lucky enough to interview him. His war experience was Vietnam, but he had a childhood memory of witnessing a man being shot at a train station, a Black American man who just wanted to get off the train and get out of the confines of what they'd been in for days, and he witnessed this man being shot. So with his military history, it really added some credibility to some of the stories that were coming out of Australia. But again, when we got to America, those were, enhanced. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I got muted out there. So, again, joining us live from Australia, our guest, Nicole McCuaig. I said I do have some sound clips queued up, and I wanted to start off because the first time I watched this film, I think it was around 2006, and I was a lot more confused about white supremacy racism, and I didn't really know about racism in Australia. Like I didn't really know very much about what's happened to black people, the indigenous people there. So I'm watching this film, and this is kind of, first glimpse at, this is a global problem. Watching this film now, I know a lot more about Australia, and I know a lot more about their long history of white supremacy. I want to play the clip from the film where you all are talking about the whites only policy, and then kind of get your thoughts on that. This is from the documentary film Black Soldier Blues, and this is you'll hear various folks commenting on what is known as the Australia whites only policy, context of white supremacy.
Thousands of Americans were about to descend on Australia. The Australian Prime Minister, John Curtin, welcomed the white Americans, but vehemently opposed any black American troops being stationed in Australia.
Curtin comes out of the labour movement. He himself has very strong views about race. And of course, he does not want black Americans coming into Australia because it's going to breach the White Australia policy.
The Immigration Act, the so-called White Australia policy, was the first Act of Parliament passed in 1901, and it was introduced to protect Australian society from the corrupting influence of coloured races. Black American newspapers joked that the White Australia policy stopped black allies from entering the country but wouldn't stop the invading Japanese.
Our officers, I guess the Army itself, had this alarm of segregation before we got there. You know, I never knew that Australia was lily white. It never crossed my mind.
When blacks were stationed in Europe and in the Pacific, they often encountered situations where whites were just given preferential treatment, or when they arrived in Australia, they were kept on the ship.
After weeks at sea, Captain Jaime Samuelson was preparing his restless men to finally step onto dry land.
Our equipment and clothing were all assembled, and we were ready to debark. Then came a message. The 96 and the 576 were not to get off the boat.
The black soldiers were kept cooped up on their ships while Prime Minister Curtin pressured the American government to respect the White Australia policy.
A lot of correspondence goes between his office and the American government saying, I will not accept these people, they cannot come here, but of course they have to defer to the Americans who say, look, we want you as a base, we will bring whoever we like.
Context of white supremacy. I hope that came through clearly. I guess if we could start, if you could share just with our listeners, you reside in Australia, your knowledge of the whites-only policy, even before you got involved in this project, your understanding of the whites-only policy, just so they have history.
I really didn't know much about it at all. Working in documentaries, you tend to become an expert very quickly about a subject and then you move on. So I really didn't know much about the White Australia policy. I'd heard it referred to, and I actually thought it was in reference to Aboriginal Australia, but it wasn't. Initially, it was an immigration policy designed to keep non-whites from taking jobs from Australians who were settling at that time. And I'm not an expert on this, by the way, so I'm telling you my perception of it, that it was an immigration policy designed to keep jobs firmly in the hands of Australians, because initially it was to keep Chinese labour out of Australia because they were working for less money, longer hours, and it started to annoy the unionised workers here. But I think Curtin was a particularly racist man, and I don't think he was, I think, he really wanted to keep black Americans out of the country, to keep the whites, his version of the White Australia policy in place. But he couldn't do it because in the end we needed the defence of the Americans and we had to go along with it. There was no choice. And what the Americans discovered, from what they told me, when they got on the ground in Australia, it was a very different story. They were quite welcomed by a lot of the Australians.
I know for myself, as I said, when I first saw this film, I was a lot more confused and just whites-only policy. And you said, this was put in place to keep out non-white people so that jobs firmly in the hands of white people. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I didn't know. Just seeing this, when you have the visual and you're seeing black troops are coming here to help these people, not as invaders.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. There's another one. That is racism, white supremacy. I can't think of a better illustration of a global system. You have black people coming to defend these white people. Mm-hmm. No, we don't want you here. In fact, don't even get off the boat.
And your newspapers made fun of us, and rightly so, because it was ridiculous. And there's one comic in the documentary where we're keeping black Americans off our shores, but there is a great big Japanese bomb about to hit us, and that was a comic that was released in an African American magazine at the time. So it was ridiculous.
Wow. racist. I've been one of our big things on this program is to be as precise as possible with words, and I've been telling victims often in discussions on white supremacy, I find myself saying, "Oh, that is so crazy," or "Oh, that's ridiculous," and then stopping. The most accurate term would be like, "Oh, that is so racist," or "Oh,
yeah, you're right."
Yeah, I'm just for my listeners. Yeah, just catch that. Often when you're saying something is crazy, it's really just racist.
Yes, it is.
I think my co-host is here, and she also has some questions she'd like to ask. I again want to tell listeners this film is very constructive. If you're able to get your hands on a copy and watch it, Black Soldier Blues. Our guest today, the director and co-writer, privileged to have her joining us live from Australia. Justice, your line is open. Please feel free.
Can I be heard now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Greetings to the guest. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. What's your
Nicole.
name? Nicole?
Nicole? Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Greetings. Why did you help make the documentary Black Soldier Blues?
I think I was approached by two producers to direct the documentary, and once I started reading the research, as I mentioned before, I'd done a whole lot of war interviews in Australia with our own white war veterans who had spoken about meeting Black American soldiers and the experience of that, and also some more sinister stories of direct racism meted out to Black Americans in Australia. So I was really interested in doing the subject, because of that.
Do any white people in Australia use the word nigger? If so, whom are they referencing?
I can't remember ever hearing anybody use that term in my direct circle of people. I know it's used. I was surprised. I heard a little bit of your interview with Dr. Gray, and I was surprised to hear her mention that she hears the word quite a bit. I don't think I've ever heard that word used. And I know that people, I certainly know growing up in a family that was absolutely opposed to racism, I really wouldn't have heard that word at all.
When you see non-white people getting directly mistreated in Australia, do you say or do anything to attempt to stop the mistreatment? If so, what do you say or do?
I can't remember being in a position where I saw direct mistreatment in front of me, but I guess what I have been able to do in films like Black Soldier Blues, in my work, is give people a platform to tell their experiences and hope that you build an empathy with people that you talk to and better understand other people and, the experiences that they've had. So that is probably the most proactive I can be in my situation, is that I use my work to give people that platform. I've done a few, as I mentioned to Gus, I've done a couple of docos in Aboriginal communities and talked to different communities in all sorts of races as part of my work, and I think that's the place that I get to defend in some ways, in a little way, not a big way, but the best that I can do in my situation.
What are some of the ways you benefit from non-white people being mistreated in Australia?
I don't benefit at all. There's no benefit for me in mistreatment of non-whites at all.
How does the system of racism, white supremacy, harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
Sorry, I missed the first bit of that question, I think, because of our line.
I'm sorry. How does the system of racism, white supremacy, harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Just repeat it if you don't mind.
Okay. The question is, how does racism, white supremacy, harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
Harm non-white people. Did you say, is that harm, H-A-R-M?
Yeah.
That's me being an Australian. Sorry about that. How does it harm non-white people? I think it's really harmful. I think it harms non-white people with opportunity, and in some of the experiences I've had, people I've talked to, self-respect, family connections. One of the most appalling things that's happened in our country was the advent of the stolen generations, where children were forcibly removed from their families to be assimilated into white culture, and that was a devastating indictment on our history. So that is probably the most prolific thing here that's happened, that forcibly separated from their families, often growing up and never knowing. I was just reading an article yesterday in our national newspaper called The Australian about a man who has been awarded a sum of money because he was taken from his mother at an early age. She then wrote several times to the government to try and find her son and could never find him. And I don't think they ended up meeting. It was a tragic story, really, really sad.
I've watched part of the documentary, and I heard the... Okay, sorry, I have something in my throat. I've watched part of the documentary, and I heard the narrator say, "some racist." What do you think the narrator means when he says, "some racist"?
I'm not sure what that sentence would be. I don't know if I could answer that not knowing what the whole sentence is. Do you know the rest of the sentence? As in some racist parts of the society, or I'm not sure how I could really clarify.
I'm sorry. I think it was less racist.
Oh, right. Less racist. Yeah, I'm not sure what the context of that would be. I guess there isn't a less racist is what you're trying to say, and it's a misleading kind of comment. It's ambiguous and probably misleading. Is that what you're getting at?
So, you need context for that question?
I think I probably do to answer it correctly.
Gus, do you have a clip to that one, or?
I don't have a clip, but I remember that spot in the film, and he was saying, the narrator, he was saying that the black soldiers were from the north, and the officers there were less racist than down south. The white people in the north were less racist than down south. I think that was the context of where this was being mentioned, because I think in the...
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yes. The context is they were talking about how the black soldiers, many of the black soldiers in Australia came from the north in the United States, and many of the white officers came from the south. and the context of that less racist statement was that the officer or the white people in the North in the U.S. less racist than the white people in the South.
Yes, I do know the comment you're referring to now. And you would argue that that's not the case, or you just don't think that you can qualify racism? I guess what we had heard was that was the case, that the experiences of... I know that Otis, one of the characters, said that, the experiences of his childhood were not as dramatic as some of the guys that he knew from the South. I guess that's what we were saying with that comment.
I don't have any more questions at this time. Go ahead, Gus.
Groovy.
Thanks, Justice.
Groovy.
I hope I answered those okay. Got a bit confused there.
Context of white supremacy. Yeah, I've heard a couple people use that term, less racist. It's always interesting. I just like to get them to explain when I hear the term used.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, my goodness. Sound clips. Hopefully when people hear the clips, if they're coming through nice and clear, you'll be motivated to check out the film Black Soldier Blues. This clip, and as I said, this film, you also have some of the white Australian residents who experienced this, who were still alive at the time, who shared their thoughts, seeing all this happen. This is a gentleman, I believe his name is Robert Eason, and he's talking, and I thought it was just contradiction. That's all I can say. What a contradiction. I'll play it and then we'll get Nicole's thoughts. Context of whites. This clip was like 60 seconds. Should be really quick.
The Australian people just love the Americans, with their smart uniforms, great accents, and money to burn. Both white and black servicemen were welcome as far as the average Australian in the street was concerned.
I suppose Australians, in one sense, grew up with a different attitude to dark people. We mightn't have treated the Aboriginals too well, but they'd never been slaves in this country. I mean, whereas the American Negroes had been slaves, and they came to a culture where people were much more open to their friendship and that sort of thing. Consequently, that caused friction, because I remember one white American saying that we'd undone hundreds of years of work that they started.
Context of white supremacy. That is an incredible 50-second clip for many reasons. We'll go with the latter first. That sentence at the end where he said that one of the white American officers said that the white people in Australia had undone 100 years of work. Wow. What are your thoughts on that comment?
I think, they were saying that there really were genuine connections and friendships between some Australians and black American soldiers. And I think, when we're interviewing people in situations like this, their memory and recollection of it is not going to be based on necessarily an educated view. So I think, he was suggesting that the white Americans were annoyed at the Australians because they were so hospitable to black American soldiers, and then of course it's so contradictory that he would suggest at the beginning that we were kind of treated the Aboriginal people badly, but that's different. It's a different story, and Australians often do that. They sort of manage to manage to put things into different categories because we've got this idea that we're accepting, we're the really good old Aussie fun-loving people, we accept anybody, but it's not true. So I think that is a contradictory statement. But there was a genuine connection between Australians and the black Americans, and they told us that. The guys that I interviewed in America said as much. So. But I understand where you're coming from by playing that, it is a really contradictory comment.
I almost want to play it again. He said we didn't treat the
Aboriginals so well.
Yeah, I mean, what?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's right. I know. Yeah.
What a euphemism. I mean, wow. I guess Hitler didn't treat the Jews too well either.
Yeah, well.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a complicated time. I mean, I was just reading a diary entry from Jaime Samuelson. I went back to find one of the entries that he'd put in there. At the end of the doco, he says, you know, the black man is equal to the white man in, you know, he had really changed by the end of the war, Jaime Samuelson, because he was, for those that don't know, was the white officer in charge of a black unit. And by the end of the war, he had changed. I was just reading that comment again, and actually he goes even further and says, here we are in World War II fighting initially the Germans who thought they were a superior race, and we were saying, you are not a superior race. We are going to make that message very clear. But at the same time, we have segregated our black servicemen and treat them not as well as our white servicemen. So it was there were contradictions on a lot of fronts at that time.
You and you have this is, you know, documented in the film where the black soldiers themselves speak about, you know, what a good time they had and some of the relationships that they had with the white people in Australia. And this is I mean, there are many moments in this film that stand out, but this is another clip. This is a white professor, Kay Saunders, who's in the film, and she has a lot of great commentary. I was thinking we should contact her.
Yes, you should. She's terrific. Yes, she's great.
I'm gonna follow up on that today, if possible. But yeah, she has an excellent moment at several, but this is a really fascinating moment, and I wanted to get Nicole's thoughts on this as well, commenting on black troops there and their failure to understand that these Australian white people were also racist. Yeah, we'll play this and we'll be right back.
That's the irony. In a country that supports a whites-only policy, that black Americans were much better treated here, and it's because they're Americans. They don't realise that Australia is deeply, deeply racist.
And I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone here. I myself did not really understand racism, white supremacy as a global system when I saw this film the first time. But I just wanted to get your comments as a white person who acknowledges that we are in a global system of white supremacy, how these black troops could totally fail to recognize that these white people are really racist. This whole country is super embedded in white supremacy, and there are examples of it everywhere.
Yes, that's a mystery to me. I don't know the answer to that. I think there was genuine connection to the black American soldiers because they were viewed as part of the defence of the country, really, and so they were treated differently. And so I don't think black American soldiers would have witnessed racism in the other parts of our culture. I think what they saw was a friendly face who was accepting, and they had experienced, they had different experiences back home prior to coming to Australia, and I guess that's how they formed that idea. And really, we didn't display that embedded racism so openly. And I don't think that it's across the board in Australia either.
You don't think what's across the board?
Racism. I don't think it's, that you can possibly stamp it onto a whole country.
I think, did Professor Saunders, did she just say that racism is deeply embedded in the country? Did she just say that?
Yeah,
oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think that means that you can suggest that every single person has that quality, and I don't think she would mean that every single person has that quality. There's a lot of people that would not be racist in Australia.
Well, I like I said, I would love to have Professor Saunders on the program, but we have had white people. We just had a white person on the program, and she's Dr. Barbara Trepanier, and it's in her book, Silent Racism. She says that one of the big reasons we have not solved this problem is persisting in believing that there are some white people that are not racist. She says that is simply not possible, including herself. And that thinking that there are some white people who are not racist, just that thinking alone is keeping us from solving this problem.
That's heavy. That's a heavy concept. That's heavy.
I think there's a lot more evidence for anyone who would want to take that position. You're going to have a lot easier time finding evidence to support your point as opposed to taking the view that there are some white people that are not racist. You're going to have a very tough... Or do you know some white people that are not racist?
Sorry?
Do you know some white people that are not racist? And I'll give my definition for racist is a white person who mistreats someone a white person who directly and or indirectly, consciously and or unconsciously mistreats someone because they are not white. That's my definition for racist. So, do you know a white person who does not consciously, unconsciously, directly, or indirectly mistreat anyone because they are not white?
Well, I can't speak for people's unconscious thoughts, I would have thought that people that I know were not racist. I would have thought that there was people in my direct circle that were not racist, but I can't speak for the unconscious feelings and thoughts. And you're suggesting that all white people, it's a hard line to take. I don't think I could take that line myself.
Actually, I just shared that concept as a white person, so that's a white person.
Yes, I know. Sorry, yes, I know that. I understand that. I can't take her position on that, I'm afraid. Yeah, I don't believe that. I believe there's a lot of people I know that would not. That I don't believe they're racist. I just don't believe that.
Australia seems mired in the entire planet, but I mean, if we just want to look at Australia specifically. The non-white people there, I mean, their condition is a really pitiful indictment of the continued conduct of white people in Australia collectively.
Yes.
Alrighty. Have another clip from the film. Again, the conduct of white people, and this is the same thing worldwide, even though I do think in the film you all point out, which is quite a contradiction. It seems that the white people in Australia during World War II were maybe, quote-unquote, less racist to the black troops than the non-white people who reside in Australia. Let's see, they have, this is a portion where you're talking about riots that happened in Australia where black troops, they were just trying to go relaxed, get some free time, and that became a problem, another incident for racism, white supremacy.
But, I mean, we fraternized and we're friends, And matter of fact, some guys married Australian girls.
I know many a times I'm walking down the street with Eileen and get stopped by the shore patrol wanting to know, let's see your past. And while they're looking at your past and everything, one will slide up to the other and say, if I had him back home, I'd make a white man out of him. Well, see, there's not much you can say. Somebody got a 45 on and billy clubs, and there's three of them and all that. They were just nasty to the black troops.
The white MPs, the military police of the Americans, used enormous amount of force and violence against the Afro-American troops, a lot of whom, in this particular time, come from the north. They're not Southerners, so they're not going to accept this intense racism. They're not going to accept being batoned, threatened, shot.
The build-up of tension between white and black American troops reached boiling point and exploded with a series of violent clashes on the streets of Brisbane.
There's a series of riots that occur in South Brisbane between the 11th and the 24th of March 1942, and they are purely within the American forces.
After the Brisbane riots, the Queensland government demanded the Americans take decisive action.
After the big riot, the Queensland government then puts pressure on the American authorities to have black Americans taken out of the main urban centre. And it's at this time they're then sent to places like Mount Isa and Camberwell, Ingham and Townsville.
Context of white supremacy. Here again, organized and global. I just wanted to get your thoughts. You have white people here in Australia who are upset about this rioting, this chaos in the streets with the black troops. And they say, hey, white people in the United States, you've got to do something about this. And they coordinate and move the troops elsewhere. Can you kind of talk about the organized effort to solve this problem?
Yeah, I think it was done on a government level. I think the government's got together with the American authorities as well and made these decisions to relocate the troops to what I can only imagine at that time would have felt like the end of the earth to some of those guys because they're really remote. So that was their decision to bring order about.
Wow. When you say remote, like how far are we from a major city when they relocate some of the troops, the black troops?
Some of the places that she's talking about would be 6, 7, maybe 8-hour drive from a major city.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some of those guys would have been, yes, in very remote locations. And I think it would have been very confronting for them to be out in our Australian bush, which is quite harsh. There were towns around there. I mean, there's stories of with the township, but certainly from what I heard from the guy in Charters Towers. Charters Towers is a small town in north of our country. It's probably a few hours drive inland from one of the major cities up there, Cairns, and the guys up there, it's a very small town, were located, again, way further out of the township. We were interviewing a man in Charters Towers, and he drove us to the location, and it was extreme Australian bush, which is quite harsh.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that racial dislocation. I mean, this is embarrassing. It's even hard to even just think about some of the abuse black people have suffered in service. In service.
I know. It's upsetting. It's awful.
Some of the other atrocities that the documentary catalogs, and I'm curious to see. I'm sure with every project things get left out. If there are other of these, or how many of these reports you came across. These are some of the stories that these are white residents in Australia that they remember, just things that they recall from World War II with the black troops being assaulted and mistreated by white American officers.
There are rumours in small towns throughout Queensland of black American soldiers being shot and killed by white Americans. Some of the accounts are reliable, but none appear in any official military records.
In Mount Isa, I interviewed some men who were engineers who worked for Mount Isa mines, and they were professional men. They were already older. They were in their 40s, so they're quite reliable informants. And one of them saw an altercation between 3 black American servicemen and white MPs over black Americans going into a hotel to drink and asking the barmaid out for a date. The white MPs didn't like this because they think that it broaches the colour line. There's a fight, they go outside, and several informants said they saw a white MP shoot one of the black Americans. And as they said, just bundled his body up and threw it in the back of a truck, and that was all they heard of it. So Australians were absolutely shocked when they saw this, absolutely appalled.
Context of white supremacy. I'm just curious as to how many of these types of incidents that you come across in doing this film of white residents remembering just blatant abuse of black troops.
Yeah, there were quite a few more stories than what ended up in the documentary. And some of those came by way of... there was at one point... Sorry, my memory on this is a little bit hazy. I might remind you that this was 7 years ago, and I'm getting older. Some of the accounts came by way of handwritten accounts from North Queensland, which is the state that I live in, and there were more stories like that. And when I was doing, as I mentioned before, I was doing interviews with veterans in Australia. There were more accounts in those interviews as well of people witnessing that kind of racial tension and abuse.
That even when I heard it just now, that contradiction stands out when I hear a white person in Australia saying, "Oh my God, this is appalling seeing these black people treated this way." It is astounding to hear that, because you all are doing the same thing to the non-white people. And it is a trend I've observed. It seems to be a trend I've observed with white people, period, worldwide, that I've said this, they will throw other white people under the bus sometimes and say, "Look at those white people being racist." And it's like, wait a minute, aren't you all doing the same thing?
Yes, it is. It's completely hypocritical. And I don't think the documentary is saying that it's not. I think the documentary knows what it's saying in those situations. And that's why we have comments from people like Kay Saunders, who reinforces the idea that there is deep-seated racism in the country.
Wow. Again, joining us live from Australia, our guest, the director and co-writer of Black Soldier Blues, Nicole McCuaig. Again, this film is fantastic because it has, you have the veterans, the black veterans there to tell their story of what they went through. And some of the stories that they share in this are just incredible. There's one particular incident, and you actually mailed me a letter from Mr. Crosby, Mr. J. Crosby, and he's since passed away. But some of these stories. This is Mr. Crosby, in his own words, talking about the refusal to give arms to the black troops, which is incredible in the middle of World War II.
Incredible.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's another situation where you can't say it's incredible. You just really have to say it's racist.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you.
I'm learning too.
Thank you for catching me. Just extraordinary example of white supremacy. Thank you for correcting me. This is Mr. J. Crosby, black male, victim of white supremacy, racism, and talking about, not getting a gun in the middle of World War II.
Soldiers weren't even issued rifles to protect themselves if they came face to face with the Japanese.
I was on guard duty first. I didn't have a weapon, had a club in my hand. Here it is, my turn was 12 o'clock at midnight, and we could hear the Japanese voices, black... Yankee, why you fight? They don't want you in USA. Why you fight? Go home. We your friend. That type of thing. All I had was a club. If they had known, if they only had known, they just didn't know. They just assumed we all had weapons.
What to say?
Yes, what to say. I was absolutely stunned when he said that in the interview. And I think I, took a breath back with surprise at that whole notion that they would be unarmed in a war, actually standing outside their camp in the middle of the jungle. No, it was just, appalling.
What do you, I'm just curious, your thoughts on what he reports that the so-called Japanese troops were saying to him, that, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think they would have been questioning that a lot. I think their experiences while they were there in the war, they would have been, I think right at the end, one of the veterans mentions that they passed that Statue of Liberty, and one of them says, that dirty bitch, because they came back thinking that they were going to go back into this segregated, what had they been fighting for, really, was what they were sort of saying to us.
That sort of thing, when I hear, reports like this, and there's so many of the just boundless incidents of white supremacy where it really does. Every white person becomes indicted, because when you are a white person and you're standing around seeing, wow, there are black troops that are out here in the middle of a war and they don't have a gun. Whoa, what am I doing about this? And when you are a white person and you don't do anything, and the evidence shows, there have to be tons of white people who are okay with this. Either I'm just not going to worry about it, I know about it, and I'm just not going to do anything, or I'm okay with this. Either or, you are indicted if you're a white person. I mean, is what I'm saying? Okay, just want to make sure it makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This, unfortunately, and this is why I think this is such a great bit of footage. Global. I was so, as I said, when I saw this the first time 7 years ago, she said, I was not thinking this is a global problem. I was still, I think, in my mind thinking there's some place you can go where black people are not mistreated. There's some place you can go where there isn't, racism, white supremacy. I was still thinking that might be possible. And this film kind of helped, know that just is not the case. And some of the sad things that you will run into worldwide, black people raping white women. At this point, I mean, I don't even know what to say other than you should just expect this. As long as white supremacy exists, you should expect there to be some threat or accusations around raping black males, accosting white women. This is an unfortunate portion of the film, very important, and I wanted to play this bit and then get your comments, Nicole. This is, standard operating procedures, standard and to be expected under white supremacy.
In a more widely documented case, 6 men were charged. The only white women in the islands were nurses. Black men weren't allowed to fraternize with these women and would be severely punished if caught. On many occasions, with little or no defense, black soldiers were charged with rape, which under the Articles of War carried a death sentence. Ken Alyard, an Australian working for the US military, was told to get his weapon and fall into a special detail. He was totally unprepared for what followed.
We went to an area and there were, these Negroes were in a sort of hollow square, and they were about 2 lines of them, and it would be about 15, 20 paces apart. And we stood at the rear, and the sergeant said, stand to, watch your front. If they break ranks, shoot to kill. Anyway, this truck, a little Dodge weapon carrier came here. Everybody sort of focused on this noise that came into the entrance. And there was a woman standing on a seat with both hands grabbing the windscreen. She didn't have a hat on. And it drove slowly down, and they went past the front row, and nobody was identified. And it turned and started at the back row, and I couldn't help but see, she pointed at one fellow, and he sort of folded his knees and head down, and he didn't have a chance to hit the ground, because as soon as he did, one of these characters who'd been walking behind put a rope over his noose, over his neck, and drew it tight, and 2 fellows sort of raised him to his feet, and they dragged him along as his vehicle slowly moved along the line. And this thing this twice happened again. They identified, and these blokes had nooses around their heads, and they were then prog marched to a series of trees, and the rope was thrown up over high branches, and they were hauled away to kick out their lives by strangulation. And the voice came up, "This will happen to any of you who molest white women."
In a more widely documented case, 6 men were charged with raping 2 white nurses. The black soldiers were represented by 1 white officer. None of them made a statement, and none admitted they were guilty.
The alleged victim said that she had sex with 2, and then at one point she said 3 of the 6 men, so which meant that the 3 others didn't have any kind of sexual contact. But MacArthur reviewed the case and upheld it, and the 6 men were executed. They were all hanged.
Dearest Mother and Daddy, how have you been since I last heard from you? I know this is shocking for you. Well, Mother, this is going to hurt you. I'm in serious trouble, and I have to pay the penalty. Some time ago, I was court-martialed. I was tried under 3 articles of war: mutiny, rape, and attempted rape. Dear Eleanor, I know it is hard for you all to believe it. We will be hanged tomorrow morning. You all know just how far a colored man's words go. His word is no good. So you all read this letter. I ask you not to worry, because I'm going to meet my Lord, who is in the land. I always loved you from the first time I met you, and I shall still love you after I'm gone. I won't say goodbye. I won't say so long, because I'm sorry I can't help anymore. Take care of Mom. Your son, Arthur Thomas Brown, one who thought there was no one like you.
I won't take a side as to what occurred there. I don't know what happened, but there's just enough to intrigue me to think that something beyond the official story took place, and yet 6 men perished, and we'll never know.
Context of white supremacy. Again, what to say other than this is unfortunately to be expected worldwide, apparently, as long as white supremacy exists, raping black male. Those letters, where did you get access to these letters?
Those are incredible. We found a book called A Rape of Justice, MacArthur and the New Guinea Hangings, written by Walter A. Lusky, Luszki. We tried to find Walter, but I think from memory he had passed away, and I think we were in contact with his son. It's all a bit hazy now, as I mentioned before, but he goes through the whole case from beginning to end, documenting and searching for sort of more information about what happened, because he was there at the time. But the letters, there are pages and pages of the letters to their parents, the day before they're to be hanged, and they're gut-wrenching.
Wow.
I could read you one, actually. I've got one right here. Would you like to hear a bit more of one?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is a letter to Dear Mother. It's difficult for me to write this letter to you. I have to tell you that the military courts have pronounced a very heavy sentence upon us, for which we are not rightly guilty of. Maybe the answer lies in it because of the colour of our skin. Mother, please forgive me any wrong I may have done or disgrace I may have brought upon the family. Do not cry, Mother, you still have children left. I have learned by the feel and bitter taste of life that God is our only true friend in the end. My people will step out of the dark prison of ignorance into the bright light of knowledge. The Negro have already stumbled into the dawn of this new day with a consuming desire for education and the right to our own land. We appeal for a new trial, but we were turned down, although we thought we stood a good chance of our lives because our case wasn't half as bad as it sounded. Mother, I never know people could be so selfish and carry so much hatred in their hearts. To tell you the truth, I don't know where I get the strength from to have written these last few words to you. Lloyd L. White.
Do you have any other letters?
Yes. Did you want to hear another letter?
Sure.
This is, dear cousin, how have you been since I last heard from you? Here's something I have to tell you. I know it will hurt you, but take the best that you can. This is the last letter you will receive from me. Please don't let trouble overtake as I did. By the time this letter reaches you, I will have entered the great unknown. The bad part is I'm an innocent man. I hope you will learn the true facts someday. So goodbye, Melvin. I've got to leave you. Don't write anymore. Your cousin, Leroy. Dearest Mother and Daddy, how are you? How have you been since I last heard from you? Well, Mother and Dad, this is going to hurt you. I'm in serious trouble and I have to pay the penalty with my life. I'm sorry that it had to happen this way. Listen, Mother and Daddy, don't think for once your teachings and advice was in vain. Injustice was given to me. By the time this letter reaches you, I will have entered the great unknown. I won't say goodbye. I'll only say so long because I hope to meet you in heaven. And he signs it off with, one who thought there was no one like you, Leroy. So yeah, there's quite a few pages that they wrote letters before the day of their hanging. It's really, really sad.
Context of white supremacy. Justice, if you have some other questions you would like to ask our guest, Nicole McCuaig, please feel free.
In the first clip that Gus played, I heard the narrator say colored racist. I think that that term confuses non-white people. What do you think the narrator means when he says colored racist?
I'm really not sure, Justice. I'm sorry. I can't really say without hearing that sentence.
Oh, I think he said colored races. Colored races.
Oh, colored races.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, right. He's talking about the coloured races in regard to the White Australia policy. It means to me non-white is how it's referred to in the White Australia policy. Does that answer your question, Justice? Sorry. Yes, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah. What are some things you learned while putting together this documentary that didn't get included in the film?
Because it was a 1-hour documentary, there's loads of stuff that we had in interviews that didn't make it into the documentary. There were people that we interviewed in the States that we just couldn't work into the story that we were telling because we were also responsible to a broadcaster over here. So I think we had a 90-minute documentary at the beginning, which often happens in the documentary area. You make this long thing and it ends up getting cut back to a manageable story for television. That's the reality of how we work. What I think is left out of the documentary probably is more of the stories of those men. Those interviews were, in some cases, 5-6 hours long. So we heard so much more about their experiences growing up, and it has often occurred to me that those interviews should at least be with families of those guys, if not in an archive somewhere, to be heard in their entirety, because they're quite, I thought that what those guys, their experiences were incredible. I mean, Jay Crosby, when he came home from the war, went on, and it says in the doco, did metallurgical engineering degree, and then discovered some incredible thing to do with, and I don't remember the exact details of this because, like I said, my memory's hazy, but came up with some incredible invention that was patented and I think used by the company that he was working with. Anyway, he went on to do these amazing things, and he talks about them in the interviews, but we could never do justice to their whole story, I don't think. And I don't know if you ever do in a documentary situation.
Have you ever been in a sexual situation with a black person?
Justice, that is very personal. No, I haven't. I'm joking about it being very personal, but no, I haven't.
What do you think white people will say or do once President Obama is not president anymore?
I don't think I could answer for white people generally. And I don't even know that I've followed enough of his current political moves to be able to comment about Obama leaving office. I don't know how people would respond. I think it would be a really varied response. It seems that his favour has come and gone. He's come into a difficult presidency, I reckon. We've seen prime ministers over here come into quite a difficult climate, which I think Obama has come into. And people, I've heard criticisms of some of the policies that he's implemented, but I've also heard really fantastic things as well. I was overjoyed when I heard his speech when he was first voted into office. I was weeping watching his speech. I was just so excited by what he was saying, myself personally, and I knew I had friends who were we were standing around monitors in my television station watching that whole thing in the early days, but I haven't kept up with it lately, so I'm not really sure how general population of white people would respond to that. Do you have an opinion about that, Justice?
No.
How do you think white people will respond?
Well, I'm not a white person, so I can't speak for them.
Mm.
But instead of, yeah. I asked for white people, so since you're a white person, correct?
Mhm.
So yeah, I was asking about white people.
Mm. Yeah. Okay.
How is you being in the documentary constructive in working against racism, white supremacy?
I just missed the first bit of that.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, Justice, I just missed the first part of that. I think the phone cuts in and out every now and then. Would you mind repeating the question?
How is you being in the documentary constructive in working against racism, white supremacy?
Well, I think the stories of the men in the documentary, they were saying to me that they hadn't had the opportunity to tell those stories, and I think it was, an opportunity for us to tell those stories. It was an enormous response to the documentary in Australia. People were overwhelmingly positive about it, and there was, interesting debate online after the documentary went to air. So I guess hearing those experiences from the men and giving audiences their voice is probably what I think we hope to get out of it.
Do you think being on this program is constructive in working against racism, white supremacy?
I hope so. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like you should be able to say whether you feel it's been constructive. That's a difficult question.
Okay, well...
I hope the film does that. I'm not sure I do that as a person, but I really hope the film is constructive in that way.
I don't have any questions. Well, I don't have any more questions for you. But, yeah, thank you for being on this program.
Thanks, Justice.
Context of white supremacy. You have a really powerful it's close to the conclusion of the film where you talk about the black soldiers. They've endured all of this, serving in World War II, and their return to the United States. White supremacy, racism, as usual. And I mean immediately, as soon as they step off the boat. I thought this was really powerful, and you actually shared a letter from Mr. Crosby, a more recent letter that I think, the continued racism that these gentlemen, these black males experienced. I wanted to play that clip and then, get your thoughts on that. This is again from the, I think, very constructive documentary film, Black Soldier Blues.
The years away at war changed many men. They had lived in the foulest conditions and seen too much death. Because of his shared experience with his black servicemen, Jaime Samuelson came to realise the stupidity of prejudice.
I must help stamp out this crazy idea that the white man has about his superiority over the colored man. The Negro is our equal physically. He is superior to us spiritually. He has the same intelligence as a white man. What he lacks is opportunity, and they are smart enough to know that we are wrong. But being in the minority, they can do nothing about it.
Most of the guys were glad to be back in the USA, not necessarily because of the welcome they were going to get, but just because they had families here. But some of the guys going by the Statue of Liberty talked about that dirty old bitch and things like that. Here we are back in the United States. And it wasn't too long after we got off the ship, before we recognized, just as you got off the ship, they had colored troops going in this direction and white troops going in this direction.
When I got home, I stopped at Grand Central Station, the biggest train station in Detroit, Class A uniform, with my fruit salad and the couple of stars we were awarded. I couldn't get a cab no place. No white cab would stop and pick me up.
A white sergeant from the other side, he came over and he saw my ribbons, and he had been in the Pacific, and we started exchanging stories. And finally he says, "Sergeant, maybe you don't know, but the black people have to get that ticket around the other side."
So when the guy handed me my discharge papers, he didn't have half of my medals and nothing to the effect that I was wounded at all. And I went over and said, "This is not right. You don't have all my information down." He said, "This is correct. I'm doing this. And besides, nigger, get back over there. You're not out of the service. If you say anything else, I'll call the MP and we'll put you in the stockade." He said, "You aren't out of the service yet.
Here you're fighting for your country, for the love of your country, and yet you don't really belong to it, or you don't feel like you belong to it. Well, they came back, some of them came back angry about that. Hell, I went over there and some of them in battle and got injured, and here I gave all this time and I come back and I got to take all this crap. I'm not going to take it anymore. I think a lot of them felt that way. But it took time for the movement to really get started. It took about 20 years from, say, 45, 46, for it to really catch fire.
Context of white supremacy. Again, this is the troops upon their return to the states. And again, as I said, I mean, immediately, as soon as off the boat, bam, racism, white supremacy, as usual. Can you kind of share some of your, because I'm sure you heard a lot more than what was shared in the film upon their treatment upon getting back to the States?
I think they were the most telling comments, you know, from those guys, and just so genuinely shocking to come back. For Jay Crosby, who, you know, I think when he looks back at that time as a young man, he was treated that way when he got off the ship. I think there was probably a fair bit of shock involved and not enough time to stand up and say, hang on a second, I need that record. Because I think what happened in later life, and that was the email I sent you, is that not having that record accurately written down, I think affected the way he got medical treatment in later life. Like, I think they were really significant mistakes that were made in a report writing way that affected his access to treatment for illness later in life. You know, so it was really had a big impact on him. But the deeper wound for them was that psychological wound of being, you know, having fought for a country and then come back to be treated that way. Obviously appalling.
Wow, that I mean, this is super important for folks who are paying attention to words. I think Justice, she said she had some, she thought there were some terms that were not clear that had been used. That, I mean, what you just said, white people not using the correct terms, not getting this veteran, Mr. Crosby, not getting his information correct, not using the correct words, had long-term damaging consequences for this victim. And I mean, this letter that she mailed to me before the program, this is from Mr. Crosby. He's since passed away. I just wanted to share this with listeners so you get the full picture of how not getting this information correct. What you just heard it. You just heard them not getting his information correct. Long-term impact of racism, white supremacy. Mr. Crosby, he writes, this is to Nicole, our guest. Hi, Nicole. I am slowly recovering from my surgery and cardiac arrest. I am really grateful to you and your group for this special documentary. It is a shame and a disgrace for me in particular to not be recognized by the Veterans Administration, or for that matter, my government, after all I went through and suffered as a loyal soldier fighting for my country. Perhaps those who view this film will open their minds and hearts and make an attempt to correct some of these past evils. They claim to have lost, destroyed, or simply can't find all or none of my military or medical records. This is one. I think it would be better to replace ridiculous with racist, but I'll read it the way he has it. This is ridiculous. World War II occurred during a very racist and hateful period of our lives, and I and other soldiers like me are the victims. As the result of my recent surgery and illness, I am taking 20 pills a day to survive, which is very expensive. These and all of my medical expenses should rightfully be assumed by my government. Thanks to you once again, and I will be looking forward to receiving the tape. I will never forget you guys for what you have done, and I will stay in touch. Love to all. Sincerely, Jay, Mr. J. Crosby. The gentleman that you just heard talking about, they said, nigger, you're not out of the military yet. Get to the back of the line. It's right. It's what I say. Move. Mr. J, your thoughts, Nicole?
Yeah, I think just at such a vulnerable time to come back from war already, probably, missing family and wanting to get out, probably, get away from all of it. And he probably just thought, well, I'll just, what the hell, doesn't matter, I'm just going to get out of here and go and see my family. Not realising the long-term impact of that moment, tragic. But it was a real privilege to interview Jay. He was so honest and welcoming, and, we sat interlocked in interviews for hours, and I could have talked to him for days. He had so much to say and was so, gracious about his experiences as well. They all were, actually. Those guys were fantastic.
Wow. I wanted, you said you had come across such great information. I wondered if you could share some of the books. Before I did that, Justice, she said there were some terms that she thought were confusing that were used. Justice, do you want to point out those terms?
Sure. Well, are you talking to me, or just want to make sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I heard 3 terms. I was watching some of the documentary yesterday, and one term that I heard was less racist. I asked you a question about that, and I heard some other terms during the program, and those terms were in the clips, and they were colored races, what was the other term? Gus, do you know what the other term was?
That was not clear. I would say there were a couple times where I didn't think the correct term was used. I pointed out ridiculous, and I made that error as well. She said Australian. When she was talking about the whites-only policy, she said to hold jobs for Australians. And when I repeated back what she said, I substituted the term white for Australian, and she said that was accurate. And a key one that she caught herself when she was talking about what white people in Australia do, and she was saying they, and she stopped and she caught herself and said we. I thought that was, I underlined that myself. Very important. And I know that white people, that's another one that they will do. When talking about white people, they will say they when they're white. It should be we.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I remember the term now. And then another clip, I believe the recent clip that I got played, I heard the narrator say prejudice. So far, all of those terms that in the documentary and in the clips, it was the narrator, and I thought that was very interesting. So the narrator was the one who was saying all of those terms that can confuse non-white people. So
that's interesting, Justice, because that is me as the writer as well, is saying those words. So, the blame for what the narrator says, or the, any criticism of what the narrator says is really criticism of how I wrote it. So the terms, if they're unclear, would come down to the way that I was writing it.
Okay, so
which I accept responsibility for.
You interrupted me. I forgot what I was about to say.
Oh,
do you know
sorry.
where I left off at?
No, I'm sorry.
Gus,
You're saying that it was interesting that all those comments came from the narrator.
Yeah. That's what I was saying, and I think that the narrator is a white person, and I think if he is a white person, I think he was practicing racism.
Right. Yeah. So that really, it's not him practicing it because he's reading the words that I write. So you're suggesting that it's me practicing that in what I write, which...
Still, the if the narrator is a white person, he is still practicing racism, white supremacy, indirectly and directly, since he is a white person. So even if he isn't reading those words, and if he's just go ahead and go. Walking down the street, I mean, he's still practicing racism, so.
Did you have any other words that you felt weren't clear?
Oh.
No, but I do want to say that I think the narrator and herself, and the guest today, Miss Nicole, is practicing racism because she was the one who wrote the words. So, I just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? She suggested that the terms that you're using, that they're not clear. You said that would be you as the writer.
Yes, that's me as the writer, definitely.
What do you think?
I think that's harsh, of course. But I understand what she's saying. I absolutely understand what she's saying. And maybe it's better to say that I'm uneducated in the way that I was phrasing things in the narration. Well, that's how I would view it for what Justice is suggesting, I think. I don't think I would have set out to write racist narration. But I understand what she's saying. The tone is not specific.
Terms are important. As a writer, words are very important. Excellent work. I will check the phone lines. We have some folks that have a hand up. Significantly less people with a hand up today than when Dick Gregory was a guest on the program yesterday. I just want to make sure that that's clear for the record. Significant reduction in the number of hands today when we have a white person who Justice thinks is practicing racism, as opposed to yesterday when we had a victim of racism. That is should be the exact opposite, ladies and gentlemen, the exact opposite. The person that called in, Raz Heru, did you have a question for our guest, Nicole McCuaig? Raz Heru, are you there, sir? I think it's... Yeah, go ahead, sir. Wait a minute, I'm not picking up his line. That is so strange. Okay, Rise Root, try it one more time. Still not Still not. I'm going to mute your line and open it back up again to see if that will correct it. All right, let's try it again. Raseru, are you there, sir? Why am I not picking up? Okay, try it again, sir.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Greetings, Gus and Justice, and thank you, Ms. Nicole, for coming on the program. I apologize if this question was asked before, but do you think it is a logical position for non-white people, victims of white supremacy, to be suspicious of all white people of being racist?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
That is a logical position.
Is that it, Raseru?
Yeah, that was my only question. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Person that called in from California. Did you have a question for Miss Nicole McCuaig?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir. Good to hear from you, 909.
Greetings. Nicole, you said it was kind of harsh when Justice said that she felt like you were practicing racism in your writings. Do you still hold to that, or have you thought about it a little bit and you still think it's harsh?
I think I'd like to think about it a little bit more, actually. Have a look at I absolutely know what she's saying. So I would, definitely have a look at it.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I agree with what she said. It's just a matter of driving home points, and I think thinking, how would this, how would this help and clarify some things for, the victims and non-white people that view the documentary. So, I agreed with what she said. And as far as
the other thing too to consider with writing a documentary is that we also are beholden to the broadcaster. Obviously, in this situation now, commissioning editor was a white man. But they will look at your narration and modify it, and sometimes we do have to go with the feedback of the broadcaster, or else they just won't show the show. So sometimes it's, do we go with that tone? Is it important enough for me? The terms that I'm using, are they important enough, or do I want the stories of those men to get on television? And that was the most important thing for me, was that those stories made it to television. So sometimes I am grappling with other parts of the chain of making a documentary.
Oh yeah, I understand that. So you're saying you had rewrites?
Yes. Oh yes. Many. We go through weeks and weeks of changes, and they're not always with regard to narration. There can be visual changes in the documentary. They may not feel, at one point they wanted us to bring back the Australian, Australian story a little bit toward the end, which I probably didn't necessarily think we needed to go back to Australia, but that's the broadcaster. We've got an Australian audience. There are times where I pick my battles. Some of them I can win, and some of them I can't. And so I choose my battles.
Okay. And will you, the full interviews of the victims, I'm interested in that, and I feel like that should be available. Will you make those available?
I don't own the interviews. The producers own the interviews. I'm just the director, so I'm much smaller position of power in the chain of who is in charge of the doco. It's quite complicated where that footage is at the moment, but one thing that would be available somewhere that would be easier would be probably transcripts of the interviews, which the producers could quite easily make available somehow. We could look into that.
Yeah, will you look into that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, email Gus and let him know when those will be available.
Sure.
And I hope.
I would love to see those. I mean, wow, that would be like gold if the transcripts are easy for you to get a hand on. Yeah, I would love to see those.
Yeah, I'd have to get permission from the producer, but I'm sure that we could find a way to do that.
Okie dokie. 909, is that it?
Well, I can ask another question. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Oh, well, wait a minute. We do have other people on the line. Sorry, I got caught up in the moment. My bad. My bad. I'll see if we have time left. I'll see if I can get you in, though. Let's see. A person that called in from Texas, did you have a question for Nicole?
Greetings, Gus. Justice. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Good to hear from you, 404.
Nice to hear from you, too, and Justice. Pam, if you were out there, and all of the other callers and listeners, and, of course, to the guests. Hey, Justice. To the guests, I was wondering, I was listening to the atrocities that took place with these service people, of non-white service members. Do you have a listing of the number of people who were killed or hung in court-martial proceeding as a result of so-called being involved with white women while they were stationed in Australia?
No. The two cases that we have in the documentary are set in New Guinea, and one of those is really well documented, as I mentioned before, but no, I don't have numbers like that. And some of the stories, we haven't got factual evidence or any sort of, they're just personal, they're witnesses to that.
Okay, were you able to get in contact with the Department of the Military, like get a freedom of information to get, because since it's been so long, approximately 5 years, where they would be able to disclose some of those records to do any kind of research?
No.
So y'all never looked into that?
Not further than the accounts that we had. No, we didn't.
Okay.
I do think a documentary coming from the States, you know, obviously there's, this might be something that is carried further in more detail and maybe better than I could do in what we made.
Okay. The woman
I'm suggesting an American... Sorry, yes.
I'm sorry, we seem to be breaking up slightly. I'll ask this quickly and move on. The woman that you said with the 6 men, I believe it was, that got hung for an alleged assault, did she ever come out and clear these men of any of wrongdoings and said, no, they did not assaulted her?
No, she didn't. The book doesn't... the book is called A Rape of Justice, as I mentioned before, and there is no mention of her coming forward as far as I remember. I haven't read the book for a long time.
Person that called in, Minnie B. Minnie B, did you have a question for our guest?
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, hello. Let me make sure my phone isn't on loudspeaker either. Is that better?
Okay. Yes, you're good now.
Thank you. I'm appreciating the tail end of this conversation. I have to go into the archives and listen probably tomorrow to the beginning. But I was wondering if your guest had any other projects in the works, any other documentaries, and what they might be, what the subject matter might be?
Well, I've gone in quite a different direction. When I made this documentary, as I mentioned before, it was when I was quite independent. So the subjects would be probably more detailed. At the moment, I'm making documentaries for a commercial broadcaster over here. They're not as deep. They're not very controversial. And I really get a great deal of pleasure out of telling people's stories. So that is my current employment. And in the last couple of years, I also embarked on the project of my first daughter, which has been an amazing project, and slightly different to those of making documentaries.
And have you found that this documentary's been profitable for you?
No, documentaries generally aren't profitable, and certainly for the audiences that we get, they don't make profit. I don't think it's screened in the States. I'm not sure about that. It may have screened on one of the cable networks, but no, it didn't. It wasn't profit. I assume you're talking financially profitable. Am I right? Sorry, I missed that.
Not exclusively.
Not
I just
exclusively.
wondered
Right.
how it benefited you. If you found that this was a stepping stone, or did your status or stature in the filmmaking industry increase with this film?
It is probably the most important film for me personally. The experience of making it was really the most satisfied I've felt probably of any of the docos that I've been involved in. Not that I haven't had other levels of satisfaction in the other shows, and I really do, like I said, take great pleasure in interviewing people and hearing their stories. But this was a particularly special experience for me. I still get quite weepy watching the interviews because it's, I just, found that they were really incredible.
The person that called in, Walking Bear, did you have a question for our guest, Nicole McCuaig?
Yes, greetings to everyone. I have two questions for you, for the interviewer. Now that you've been on the program and you've heard the term global system of white racism, white supremacy, if you would have used that terminology in the documentary, do you think it would have ever been aired? And also, what was the viewers of Australia, the white Australians as well as the original people of Australia, any ideas how they viewed the film?
I don't think they would have accepted that terminology in the narration, to be really honest with you. I don't know for sure, though, because as I said before, I don't feel like the broadcaster we were working with was racist. I think he was, extremely pleased with the program, but I don't know if he would have accepted that terminology. I can't say for sure. That's my guess. The second question, we had great feedback as a result of the documentary. There was an online forum that happened afterwards, and overwhelmingly kind of positive response to it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're right.
The person that called in, 818, did you have a question?
Greetings, Ms. Nicole. I wanted to ask you, in Australia, the white people that you know or are acquainted with or have been around, what do they talk about when there are no black people around, and do you ever hear them speak negatively about black people? And if so, what kinds of things do they say?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I have heard that. Australians tend to be overly humorous about things, and that is probably more of the kind of thing I've heard is people taking off accents. It's quite popular over here to take off accents, but because it sounds fun, it's not viewed as racist, and it is racist. Yes, I've heard that kind of thing. I've never heard overtly cruel terminology, I don't think. That's probably the style of thing that Australians really don't think it's harmful if it's in a joking manner, but it is. It's as racist as any other, even, any other kind of language.
Do you think that putting the racism in the form of a joke makes them feel more relaxed or justified in doing it, and that maybe it gives them an excuse to say they aren't being racist?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
The person that called in from Cleveland. Cleveland, did you have a question for Nicole?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, Ms. Nicole. I just have one question for you. Did this film make Australian people feel better about the way they practice white supremacy over the Aborigines or original people of Australia?
Did the film, I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I don't think I heard it entirely.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did this film make Australian people, white people in Australia, feel better about the way they practice white supremacy over the original people of Australia, known as the Aborigines?
No, I don't think that would have been an outcome, really. I think the way that they think about that is as a separate issue. And it's hypocritical, and we've mentioned it earlier in the program. Gus was really played a classic example of that hypocrisy in dealing with one form of racism and not the other. Does that make sense? I don't think the film, I think they would have viewed the film as a separate issue.
Oh, okay. I'm still confused about what the other kind of racism. What other kind of racism is there?
Yeah, there isn't. I'm saying that's how it's perceived, I think, in a lot of Australians' minds, that there is other forms of racism. There's different ways of seeing issues that are relevant for...
I'm sorry, did you say there is?
No, I'm saying I'm saying it's perceived that way by Australians, I think. Some Australians, I can't speak for all Australians, but...
just for yourself.
Just myself, I'm saying, no, there's one kind of racism. I completely understand what you're saying.
Okay, and another question. It was just about the area of South Brisbane. What is the demographics or the makeup of that city today?
So this is the city I live in, Brisbane. There's about 2 million people. It's a relatively small city. And we're north of Sydney. So Sydney is the biggest city in Australia. We're north of Sydney. Relatively modern city, I'd say. And we recently were quite badly flooded. So we've been through a little bit of drama in the last few years. In the last year, sorry. And beautiful, in my opinion.
The demographics. What are the demographics again in terms of racial population?
Largely white Australian, I would say.
80%, 90%. I mean, if you don't know, that's fine. But is it?
Yeah, no, I really couldn't give you statistics. Even couldn't give you close to. Okay. I wouldn't know at this stage. I'm sorry.
No worries. And last caller, Negrito's Way. Did you have a question?
Oh, good evening, Gus.
Good evening, sir.
Oh, good, and your guest. I just have a question. I was just curious. What does this film mean to you, and what do you hope that people watching will get from it?
The film to me means it's difficult to articulate. I hope people hear the experiences of those men and are moved by it. I don't think I set out to necessarily change people's way of thinking in documentary, because I don't think you should set out to do that. I think what I hope to do is allow people the platform to tell their story, present it the best way I can, and, deal with the criticism the best way I can, and hopefully learn from that. Learn from what you guys are saying to me today as well. Learn from that criticism. But ultimately, I want people to be moved. I want them to hear those stories and feel moved, like I was when I sat and listened to them. So I guess I try not to bog stories down too much with detail or information, rather than allowing people to just tell their stories and hopefully move an audience. That's what I would have hoped for the film, and, still hope for it.
Wow, I think that's we're at the 2-hour mark. I was hoping you could share some of the books before we conclude, because I'm a big reader. Some of the books that you think would give more info.
I mentioned to you, I think, Christopher Paul Moore's book, Fighting for America, Black Soldiers, the Unsung Heroes of World War II. He was a participant in the doco. That was one of the books that we looked at beforehand. A Rape of Justice, MacArthur and the New Guinea Hangings, Walter A. Lusky. And the other one was Love, War and the 96th Engineers. The World War II New Guinea Diaries of Captain Hyman Samuelson, edited by his niece. So she's taken a collection of those diary notes and put them into a book.
Outstanding. Excellent information. We thoroughly enjoyed having you on the program. I thoroughly enjoyed the documentary. I think it's very constructive. Justice, I think, also hit on some great points with the language. Less racist.
Yes. Yeah, very interesting. I agree.
Less racist. Justice, did you have anything before our guest exits?
No.
Groovy. Thank you again. We went through 12 noon there. Do they still do the noon tea time that was mentioned?
Well, yes, we still drink lots and lots of tea. That is definitely true.
Wow.
So I'm going off to have a cup of tea now.
Right on. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Saturday afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
For sure.
Okay.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Context of white supremacy. World system, ladies and gentlemen. World system. Second guest from Australia. If you are a new listener to the C.O.W.S, you can go back in the archives. In fact, I would encourage folks, if you have not heard the program with Dr. Ann Patel Gray, definitely go back and check that out. She is married to a white person. That's in the program, but she has some understanding of white supremacy. I think she has a lot of constructive information about the conduct of white people, and I think she had a lot of great information on white supremacy. She is married to a white person. Yeah. So yeah, and she's also in Australia. So yeah, I would highly encourage folks go back and check out that program in the archives to get more information on that particular area of the world, and view the film. View the film, Black Soldier Blues. Very, very constructive. I'm going to take a quick, quick break, and then we'll come back and do news and check the phone lines. What I was going to say is that I believe just because of being in this particular area with a high concentration of white people, they have phenomenal libraries. And I mean phenomenal libraries. Just being here has given me access to a lot of material that I don't think I would have got my hands on if I was in an area with a lower number of white people. That's just the way racism, white supremacy is set up. That's how I saw this film, Black Soldier Blues, University of Washington Library. These universities and colleges under white supremacy are just like repositories of evidence of how white people have molested and abused non-white people. That's how I saw this film. That's how I found out about it. They had it in their catalog, looked interesting, and very constructive. And I was thinking, just because of that, I probably come across information that a lot of other people have not seen. I'm sure a lot of listeners hadn't heard of this film. At least I didn't hear too many folks saying they'd heard of it. And I was thinking another documentary that I've seen that I suspect many listeners have not seen, Witness to Apartheid. Fantastic film. Again, white people did this film, but it is phenomenal. It is a documentary film on racism, white supremacy in the area of the world known as South Africa. I have a sound clip that I'm going to play. Incredible Dr. Welsing moment in this sound clip. Really, if you can make an effort to get your hands on this documentary film, do so. It is fantastic. Witness to Apartheid. It came out in 1984. It got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Film. Desmond Tutu is in the documentary film. And what reminded me of this film, I broadcast yesterday with Mr. Dick Gregory. Desmond Tutu in this film, what I thought, extraordinary moment. Desmond Tutu, Nobel Prize winner, black male, victim of white supremacy. He says, just being truthful, younger black males in South Africa, they have no reason to listen to me at all. And he says, the reason is because we have not produced the goods. Meaning, we have not replaced the system of white supremacy. And he said, for nonviolence to work, there has to be a minimum standard of treatment. Meaning, for nonviolence to end the system of white supremacy, white people have to have a bare minimum of standards with regards to how they're going to treat non-white people and especially black people. Desmond Tutu in this documentary says the evidence shows that white people do not have a minimum standard with regards to how they will treat black people, meaning anything goes, whatever. If that means 50,000 of you all die, oh well. If that means 500,000 of you all die, oh well. I thought incredible where Desmond Tutu is saying this. For nonviolence to work, white people would have to have some minimum standards with regards to conduct, how they're going to treat non-white people, and the evidence shows that that does not exist. Desmond Tutu, I'm paraphrasing, but he says this in the film, Witness to Apartheid, along with some other very grisly moments. I mean, just a blatant demonstration of white supremacy. I have a clip from Witness to Apartheid. You are going, I mean, this would be like a gong, Dr. Welsing moment. The white person who is making these comments, this is, I believe, the wife. Now, I could be incorrect because it doesn't give all the relationship, but the name says it all. The white person who is speaking, Mrs. Botha, I believe this is the wife of P.W. Botha. Folks should know who that is. If you're familiar with South Africa, you definitely know who that is. This is, I believe, the wife of P.W. Botha, who is talking about chocolate. Just, listen attentively. I think this is very constructive. The film, you should watch it, Witness to Apartheid. This is a clip from the film, Witness to Apartheid. We'll be right back with news.
White, and so do I feel as a white person. We have survived as pure whites for many years, and I think that we also have the right to keep on surviving as whites for the next 200, 300, 400 years. So I don't see why we should be we should disappear, because that's what's going to happen. The white population in South Africa will totally disappear if this new compensation of P.W. Botha comes through. We will just disappear. We will all become chocolate color.
Now in South Africa, we're not fighting the whites. We're fighting the evil system. We're fighting injustice. Now remove injustice, then you'll have peace. You cannot have it otherwise. With injustice, you have no peace. It's impossible. Anyone who wants peace must first fight for justice. Now, we are fighting for justice. Now, the nationalists think they can have peace and quiet with injustice. It's impossible. They can't have it.
I think they are so confused by communist inspiring that they think we are doing them out on something. We're doing them in, if that's the way I have to put it. They're losing out on something.
They always see a spectre behind every protest. And I just wonder whether one needs an agitator to feel hungry. I do not imagine that I need an agitator to protest against low wages. We do not have to tell children to throw stones. The children's reaction is an attitude, it's a response to injustice. Injustice in the classroom, injustice in the educational system, injustice in society. They live in slums. They have nothing to eat. Their parents have no money. Some have no houses.
I can just see that if they carry on like that and, it getting out of hand, that the army will just be called in and there'll be one big wipeout. And I myself feel the only way to stop this is to have one big wipeout like we had in Sharpeville. I think if the state president is put into a checkmate position where he really has to do something when it gets totally out of hand, I have no doubts about it that he'll call the army in and there'll be a wipeout as far as I'm concerned. Even though he talks, the language America wants him to talk and he's moving into that direction, I still believe that deep down he is a Boer. And deep down, when it comes to the point where the whites will be wiped out because of violence or whatever, I really think that he will call in the army and he'll see that us survive.
It's not possible to fight for liberation without inconveniences. We're bound to run into that, and some of us have been detained and some are killed because they're fighting for liberation. And by liberation we mean a complete change, not just trying to camouflage or trying to apply icing sugar on a rotten cake. We need a complete change, a change of heart. In fact, we need a transformation, a complete transformation, a new person and a new society.
Context of white supremacy. Witness to Apartheid documentary film, 1986. 1986. It is fantastic. That was, again, a relative of P.W. Botha, talking about chocolate, the wipeout, wanted to maintain a pure white race. Witness to Apartheid, fantastic. And again, Desmond Tutu in that film, definitely worth viewing. With that, Justice, if you have a news report for folks, we should be ready to roll anytime you are ready.
I need to go do something really quick. Could you hang on just 1 second?
Certainly.
Thank you.
I will make sure to plug tomorrow's broadcast. We'll be on Saturday. I can give today's date as well. Today would be Friday, June 24th. Friday, June 24th, 2011. We'll be on tomorrow, Saturday the 25th. We will have parents who are attempting to incorporate counter-racism into how they deal with their children. Definitely want to hear from as many parents as possible. Things that are working out well, problems that you're having. Be nice if we have some folks who maybe their children are older, and you can, reflect back on things that you wish you had done or wish you had not done. That would be good to hear too. I just think we haven't really talked about it from the parenting perspective, and I know there are a lot of people who listen to this program who have children. So hopefully you'll be on tomorrow. It's 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, and 5 p.m. Pacific. Tomorrow, context of white supremacy should be very constructive. We'll also, Calvin Thomas, he'll be here this Sunday. Great book. Mental Illness, Racism, White Supremacy, and Mental Illness, his book, all about it. He has a new book that he's working on. He'll be back this Sunday. Be great to hear from him. Lots of constructive programs. See, Justice, are you there?
Yes, I am. Okay, I'm back.
Great.
Yes, I do have a news report, and this one I was gonna read yesterday, but
tummy ache.
Yes, exactly, exactly. This one was from racismdaily.com, posted June 23rd of this year. That was yesterday. The title is North Carolina Trucking Company Accused of Racial Harassment. This article I read like I read about 2 to 3 times. It's very, very interesting. It has, I'm going to just read my thoughts along the way. Well, I'm going to tell my thoughts along the way. The federal government is suing a North Carolina trucking company for racial harassment of black workers. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission alleges A.C. Whittenhouse, Inc. violated federal law by subjecting African American employees, non-white employees, to a hostile work environment, according to the suit filed Wednesday. According to the EEOC's complaint from as early as May 2007, though at least June 2008, Whittenhouse trucker Continuous Gill and other African American employees, non-white employees, so far they have said that term twice, were subjected to derogatory racial comments and slurs by colleagues and managers. The comments and slurs included use of the word nigger, monkey, and boy. Those are very interesting. White people have said those terms before and actually here today to non-white people. And, I think that that is very incorrect of the white people to do. And, yeah. On one occasion, according to EEOC, Gil was approached by a coworker with a noose and was told, "This is for you. Do you want to hang from the family tree?" That is very interesting. I think Gil, the white person, I suspect, is practicing racism and white supremacy to this, I believe, non-white person. Well, I believe the coworker is a non-white person, and the complaint also alleges the company's general manager told Gil, "We are going coon hunting. Are you going to be the coon?" Coon hunting, very interesting. It's like Gil. I suspect still he is a white person. I suspect Gil is practicing racism right there. I believe he did say that to the coworker, I believe. And when, just think about that. I think that's racism right there. Asking a non-white person if you're going to be the coon, and then they're going coon hunting. It's like hunting black people. Gil and other black employees complained to management and the co-owner, but the harassment continued. The EEOC charges. The EEOC filed suit in U.S. District Court for the Middle District of North Carolina, Salisbury Division, after attempts at a pre-litigation settlement failed. The agency seeks compensatory and punitive damages for black employees, as well as injunctive relief against A.C. Wittенhouse. Cases like this remind us that, sadly, in the 21st century, racial harassment still exists in workplaces across America. I believe us, I think when they use us, I think they mean white people, but I might be incorrect. Lina A. Barnes, regional attorney for the EEOC's Charlotte District Office, said in a statement, "No person should have to endure racial slurs, racially derogatory comments, or other offensive conduct because of his or her race. The display of nooses is especially cruel and unacceptable. The EEOC will vigorously prosecute cases like this one involving racial harassment." Very interesting article. I think this article is all about racism.
Wow. That is, man, what is it? Tacky, trashy, terroristic, trifling. Worldwide, that is what one should expect from white people. Some of the things that stood out in that clip when I heard it, I can give a sound clip for one of the things that stood out.
Beware the beast man, for he is the devil's pawn, alone among God's primates. He kills for sport, or lust, or greed. Yea, he will murder his brother to possess his brother's land. Let him not breed in great numbers, for he will make a desert of his home and yours. Shun him, for he is the harbinger of death.
Planet of the Apes. Second thing that stood out in that article, niggers apes, alligators, coons, and possums. What is it? Niggers, apes, alligators, coons, and possums. Yeah, niggers, apes, alligators, coons, and possums. White people, that is, sticking to white supremacist code. The other thing, that violence against non-white people, that's James Byrd. That's everything we've been talking about. Everything we've been talking about. That violence is funny. It is entertaining. Violence against black people worldwide. Constant theme of racist man and racist woman. Any other thoughts on that article, Justice?
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else you want to share with listeners?
No.
It's an excellent observation around less racist. Excellent point. And I thought it was interesting. She began to quote unquote put words in your mouth by saying, "Oh, well, you were getting at da 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 da." And all of this, I thought that was very interesting. In some way, I look at that as she followed the logic of what does it mean to be less racist in a system of whites? Like, what does that mean? Like, she just followed the logic of what is incorrect about that term. But she tried to put it on you, like, is that what you're getting at? Is that what you're saying? I thought that was pretty interesting. Quite revealing.
Do you think, did I interrupt you? Or?
No, ma'am, I'm done.
Okay, do you think you can get the narrator on the program? That did the, well, actually, no, never mind.
His name is in the credits, the narrator.
I know, but okay, it's okay.
I don't know.
Because I forgot that she was the one who wrote the words for him, so.
Yeah, I suspect.
I was gonna ask him about those terms, but I just remembered that, so never mind.
I don't know. Yeah, I hope folks will check out the film. It is constructive. This was number 5. June has been this has been a very difficult month. To have to sit through those letters, man, that was. I don't really have a comment. White people are going to hang me in the morning for allegedly raping a white woman, and I'm supposed to write my family members. Anyway, I will announce again, very incorrect. When I went to go to the phone lines yesterday, when a victim of white supremacy was on the program, there were a lot of hands. Many people had many things to say. Today, with a white person who Justice suspects is practicing racism, white supremacy, a lot fewer hands. That definitely should change. White people, the problem is white people. The problem is white. In fact, I would say this person demonstrated a much clearer understanding of white supremacy than the victim that was on the program yesterday. This person seemed to be a lot more informed. She had notes of black people. Man, white people have notes. She could pull out notes on command. That right itself is worthy of a good 30 minutes of sadness. White people on command to have notes of black people who are about to die in the morning. If you have anything you all would like to share, you can press *8 and I can go to the phone lines. I'm just going to sit with that for a moment. This white person had notes on command of black males who are about to be lynched in the morning. 404, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, Gus, thanks again for bringing me back on the line. When you were mentioning this movie documentary on the apartheid situation, and that the one that you said you saw, you said it came out in '86.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll try and see if I can check it with a local library and see. I'll probably check Emory and see if they might have it.
Emory, I bet, will have it.
Yes, they should. But you know what this brought me to mind when you mentioned that movie, and I'll get back quickly to the James Byrd situation also. I happened to pull up on Michelle Obama is in South Africa doing a visit that she's on right now. And she did a women's conference that she met with the women in Soweto, which is the heart of the black community and where the ANC got its start. And they happened to meet in a church where they did this meeting. And one of the first things that caught my attention was all of the permed hair of the women, especially older women, with the permed, the chemically altered hair, and the church. I happened to look up the church with stained glass windows, and all of those women had this white image with Jesus and the angels was all in this church. And I said, this is amazing that here we are with apartheid in Africa, and these people in the black township, and they have a black church with a white image of Jesus and white angels and stained glass on this church window. I said, if I was living out there, if I was there, I would have get a rock and broke all those windows. That's just me personally, because I think it's ridiculous. And on the Byrd situation last night, one of the things that really got to me with Mr. Gregory when he was talking about the non.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't want to hear anything about Mr. Gregory.
No, I'm not talking about him. I'm just talking about with the Byrd. I'm not going on Mr. Gregory. One of the things that came out of this incident with Mr. Byrd is that they passed this anti-gay, anti-violence legislation. And do you know that they attached it to it's now called the Matthew Shepard James Byrd bill. So in order for him to get a bill against racism, they had to attach it to a white person who was sexually ambiguous and was killed for his sexual proclivity, and that's what the bill was named. So it makes it seem that, a black person or a non-white person, no matter what we do, we cannot get something by ourselves. They have to attach it to someone white in the gay movement in order for that bill to go through. I don't know if any of them are aware of it, the Matthew Shepard James Byrd hate crimes bill.
Maximum racist aggression, Reckless 2.0. Vickers, he was pointing that out earlier in the week when we were talking about all this. He said that he pointed out that very point that you just made about this white person engaged in anti-sexual behavior, like the continued victimization of Mr. Byrd.
Yeah. So I don't know if Pam is out there, because I see that she was online when I was watching online. So Pam, if you're out there, if you could add something to this would be interesting. But I only got to listen to the last hour of the show with the lady, so I'll have to listen to the broadcast and the archives to go back to the beginning. But kudos to Justice when she kind of stopped her in her tracks to get her to go back, and as you said, not put words in her mouth. So.
I just wanted this recorded for just for the record. A suspected racist, a racist white supremacist in the chat room has the handle Trojan Pam is a she-boon.
It's probably the same one that had the Trojan Pam was a nigger, so they decided to change it up.
I told you, when you see racists upset about what you're doing, Mr. Fuller says that is a sign what you're doing might be constructive. You should try to do more of it if you see racists upset about what you are doing.
Just like I read on the Talk Shoe page, on the Cows Talk on the C.O.W.S talk show page. I was reading the comments, and I believe a racist white supremacist called me a niglet. I suspect that a racist was, getting upset from me doing my counter-racist work. So, that, like, if a white person calls me a name and, is getting upset, I need to work hard. I need to work harder.
Yes, you do. I've been reading the comment pages myself, and I'm seeing that all of the chimp-out people, they're coming on the pages and writing their commentaries, so they're still trying to get on the show. One of them managed to call in last night. I heard him when he mentioned about what happened to the truck, so they're going to show their ignorance.
Their racism, white supremacy. I think that would be more accurate. Oh, I did thank you all for reminding me. I would prefer if people not, respond to the racist posts on the show page. I would prefer that. I think that would be more constructive as opposed to name calling and, just trying to be discourteous and get into all that. Let them be tacky and trifling and terroristic, racist, white supremacists. What you can do, review the program. That would be helpful because it's just white people have nothing better to do than come and come and practice racism by giving negative ratings to the program. So you can just rate the program to make sure that the rating is high and that they do not get to just come and practice racism. Have nothing better to do. Call names, call people nigger and all this other stuff. Practice trifling, tacky, terroristic, and trifling. Every day, all day.
That they're logging into the chat room with, it's which I believe is the same person, is just going in and out and coming up with different names trying to get attention. So what I suggest, we might just want to overlook it. Don't even call or mention whatever derogatory names they want to come on the program with. And eventually they'll go away. It's like a bug. When you ignore it, they'll fly off and go into their own little corners.
818. Oh, it's a little background noise. 818. Did you have a question or comment? This background noise.
I was going to make a comment regarding the Trojan Pam as a sheep thing, but
Are you on speakerphone? It's a little loud.
I'm sorry. Yes, because I'm driving. But, I decided not to comment on that. But I do think it is more constructive to ignore them because they do it for the attention. And I just don't think they even deserve a platform on the program. So.
Yeah, several folks. I think 909 and some other folks said the same thing. They don't even, and I would agree. It, just for them to be trifling. I concur.
At least this is one good thing with TalkShoe is that it gives you an idea for you to see who is in the chat room, to give the name compared to the other site that you were on. So at least you could have a review as to who is in here and who you want to let in or out.
Well, TalkShoe, you can actually block people, or I know different platforms, they have the ability where you can just block people from participating in the chat room at all. I haven't figured out if they have that here or how to operate it. The thing that I like about TalkShoe is that you can close the chat room at any time, whereas other sites, once it's open, it's just open until everybody leaves. It's just open. Like once you open it, you can't close it. Whereas this, you can close it at any time. So if you need it open for a second, you can do so, and then you can close it if it becomes non-constructive.
Gus, I wanted to ask, what do you think it was about the move to TalkShoe that seemed to attract all the racists over at Chimp Out versus their seeming invisibility over at the tacky, trashy, trifling terroristic network.
They were there. If you go back and listen to some of the programs, the last few programs that were done at the previous network, there were racists who were calling in. They called in and had racist jokes. When Dr. Blair was on, they were playing audio clips. So there was a presence even then. So it might have been that they had been listening all along and just became vocal. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, if you go back and I think there's specific programs. I think the broadcast that we did on the film Ghost, they called in at the very beginning. Two different racists. They called in and had racist jokes, and some other white people had called in to be racist. So yeah, I mean, admitted racists have told me they've been listening. I remember back of the bus, he used to go to different explicitly racist sites and look for posts relating to the cows, and I have found some. They're there, so to be expected. To be expected.
Do you think it would be constructive to share with the listeners at some point in time some of the racist material that can be found on the Chimp Out website?
Perhaps. We discussed Chimp Out before. I guess I felt like we did that. Like Aisha said.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I guess I mean some of the stuff in detail, because when I was working on Ebony News Channel on Blogspot, I put links, for any sites that I could find where white supremacists hang out, including radio networks, so that victims could listen, and hear exactly what they say. A lot of times they don't seem to be the brightest people in the world, but I find it constructive to study them. Even in areas where I guess they know that non-white people can see this stuff, but there and Stormfront and some other racist sites, they talk pretty freely and leave an open trail of racism, for everybody to see. And I think sometimes, too, by studying some of their white supremacist networks and sites, you can get constructive information on how you can also run your own stuff off of the grid, per se, off of, the standard radio networks and things like that.
That probably would be constructive. I don't know if I'd want to focus a whole program on the Chimp Out racists, but all of those sites, like to look at them together. I think that would be constructive, because I have like the VNN site and Stormfront, some of the other sites that are more explicit, David Duke's site. I have visited those websites, and they do have constructive information. You can pick up quite a bit of info on the way white people think about non-white people. Terms, zombie, you'll get to see a lot of the terms that they use, code terms, to talk about non-white people, racist jokes, films. I remember that was a big one when I started seriously studying white supremacy. I was a big fan, still am, of Josh Wickett's film reviews on thecode.net. And when I started going to some of the explicitly racist sites, they have film reviews too. And so I started reading their film reviews, and they had quite a few films that they picked out and were breaking down racism, white supremacy, that I didn't even know about. We've done the one I referenced on this program, the James Bond film, Die Another Day. It's Live and Let Die. Sorry, Live and Let Die. The film that blatantly racist, where they're making fun of black people in the Caribbean, sexual. Anyway, we talked about it with Dr. Martin Kevorkian. But they had a whole review of this film and complained about the scene where he's in bed with a black female and called her all kind of names. Celebrated, the black people dying at the end and being humiliated and degraded. A lot of constructive information. So yeah, we could probably bundle a lot of those sites together and kind of pick out some of the content and make that a program. I think that would probably be constructive. Yes, we can get that done.
thing that you made that film mentioned with the Bota woman making about the chocolate reference and about they don't want to be extinct. But here it is that you are in somebody else's country. You left where you came from, England, Holland, wherever it is that y'all came from, and you're going to become in somebody else's country, and you're going to be saying that you don't want these people to get back to your country. It's amazing. And then you hear people are saying, so-called non-whites are saying this, let's hold hands and let's coalition and love each other and hug each other and everything is going to be great. It's, ooh.
Gus, I did want to share something with you all. I met a non-white male this week, a black male, and one of the most interesting comments I've heard in a long time, and I was just like, man, confusion. We were talking about the condition of black people today and, you know, different things that we observe, victimization. And he said to me that the best friend that black people, the black people in America have is the white American. I said, uh-huh. And his reasoning was that because black people have no particular country to go back to or culture that they brought with them, our culture is one that was created through assimilation, he said, with white people, that the white American is our best friend because as well, they have no particular country to go back to. They don't connect with European culture, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that, and this is the only country they know, they have no place to go back to, that somehow makes them the best friend that black people in America would have. And I asked him, how do you figure that with the history? And he just repeated that, and I said to him, you know, I just think that black people worldwide have no friends anywhere, period. I can't get that concept together, but I think because a lot of his clients or customers are white people, and he's making his living, you know, working with white people, whereas, you know, he does not get business from non-white people, black people. I think that leads him to identify with white people more and see them as friends instead of, you know, the logic that they should all be suspected.
Program. I don't know if y'all remember Lauren Lake, if you watch a lot of home improvement television, so on home and garden television, non-white black female. It used to call, I think it was Spice Up My Kitchen or something like that. And but anyway, she's an attorney, and she used to do commentary, like relationship commentaries on BET and the Centric Network. She was on the Atlanta radio station on yesterday, and of course, she had a book that she wrote about why black women need to look at dating and marrying white men, or something along that, why white women love black men, black women love white men, or something crazy like that. And of course, the phone got to buzzing, and it really. So I called in and I spoke to her, and I said that to me this is insane, because I asked the host, I said, have you ever heard any white show, whether it be a TV show or a radio show, where the white people come on the show and they say to themselves, okay, all white women or all white men, they're no good, I want to date black men, or no, I'm going to be looking to date black men. I said, have you ever heard that? She said, no. I said, well, why is it that we are the only ones that you hear coming up with these ridiculous books, coming with these ridiculous shows, saying that we want to date white men, or black men or black women, they're no good, and we're going to toss them aside, and we're going to run over here and look for them. I said, if you're going over there with that type of attitude and that type of baggage, then that relationship is not going to work. And what makes you think the people that oppressed you killed your ancestors, and all of a sudden you were thinking that you would be better off integrating into the bedroom? Do you think that that's the way for us to get rid of this problem that we are in? And they couldn't say anything. It's just like, well, everyone has a choice, and they need to do what makes them feel happy. I I said, yes. I said, go and ask a Jewish person, would you see a Jewish person getting on the show and said, I want to date someone from a skinhead organization or have a Nazi for their accountant or someone with some kind of Nazi in their background? Would you see them doing business with them? I said, we're the only people who are mentally ill who would write books and say these things and feel it's okay. Try to convince the rest of us to go along with it.
It's interesting to me that though we do have a choice, the choice that they're always trying to push us to make is white men. I don't hear them promoting Hispanic, so-called Hispanic males, Asian males, black women. Open your eyes to Asian males. It's always by default white men. Mm-hmm. And I don't know of any particular network or platform or book written promoting, maybe written by a black female in a tragic arrangement. I don't know of white males sitting around writing books promoting black females to white men.
No, that's what I brought to their attention. I said, I have never heard any shows, even these crazy Maury Povich shows, you've never seen white women get on there and said, okay, I hate all white men. I'm not going to date them. I'm not going to fool with them. I love dating black men. They're great. They're this, they're that. I've never heard one of them.
It's sad, and I'm wondering why. I guess maybe everybody has not been exposed to the same information, and some people are still confused. But I mean, at this point, after so many years of this intense campaign, even through Essence magazine, and seems like nearly every other so-called black media, including Ebony magazine, promoting this, it just baffles me that so-called intelligent and educated black females don't suspect that something is wrong. Questioning why are they promoting this so much and why is it always white males?
And they're making it seem as if though they're the choice for companionship on the network. And I was so glad. I'll probably email you the audio so that y'all could, Gus could probably post it on the website, where only one black female came out and made a statement and said, you know what? I don't understand why y'all are chasing after, and she made a comparison with all these crazy serial killers for white men. And if you watch Nancy Grace, you're always seeing some white men is always chopping up their wives and children, and they're not any it's not any better. But as you said it, all of these black publications, and that's what happens when you don't support your own business. You're getting revenues from other entities, so therefore you feel you have to include them and pull them into your organization, or whatever crazy things they come up with, then you have to go along with it and put it out there and push it on to us. It's poison.
Well, Essence magazine is now owned by Time Production. I don't know if it's Time Magazine or what the official name of the company is, but they are no longer owned by black people. So, yeah, I could definitely see where the hand to steer that in that direction would come from. But I was just appalled looking at Ebony magazine, one particular issue where it was about the new black family. And in that, and I made sure I scanned the picture, one of the featured so-called new black families was a black female and her white husband. And I'm like, how do you get a black family out of that? That's not a black family. They also had so-called gay couples raising children. And all of these things, which are all incorrect, were supposed to be pictures of the new black family. And to me, it was a sign of how far we've fallen behind and what bad shape we're in, because I didn't see anything, being so-called progressive or beneficial to us as a people. It's just not correct.
Did they have any black couples?
They had might have had one or two that I could remember, but I saw like the single dad, the so-called gay couple, the black female with the white male. They made sure to throw in plenty in there that was not the standard. And I don't see things about the new white family. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see things like that. What I do notice when I'm at the magazine stands, like at Walmart and drugstores and places like that, when you pick up the magazines that come out every week, I see an overwhelming abundance of feature stories on white people and their white children and these celebrity white babies. Even the teen moms from some reality show, like nearly every week, they are showcasing white people and their white babies. But it just seems like for some reason we value doing that and will promote anything as the black family, but what is a natural black family, which would be a male, mother, father, and their children. Husband and wife, I just don't see that a lot. You have to scour the internet and go to sites like blackcelebritykid.com to find things like that. And there's even tragic arrangements in there at times.
Oh, you probably, even now, I could see if they do a family and put in the grandparents in there, because with this meltdown and people moving back home, and you say, okay, now there's a mother in there or a parent moving in with the child, with their children in order to stretch the income or make it work, that would be a new black family. But as you said, they're putting in all of these ridiculous things and giving you the idea of, okay, you need to go and look elsewhere, especially with the gay lifestyle. I don't know if you all heard about the situation down in Haiti, one of these so-called homes in Haiti where the person was arrested for sexual battery on these children in Haiti, an American. So if this one person was arrested, so you know that there are other instances in other homes that if people go down there and they're so-called open to help the people, but more likely they're helping themselves, because now they have all of these people out here that they can prey upon.
The program, we have a little less than 5 minutes left in the program. Again, we'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll be dealing with parents who are dealing with racism, white supremacy, and trying to share that information with their children. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Call in. Hopefully, I know we have a lot of listeners who have children, so we definitely would love to hear from you tomorrow. I think that would be really constructive. That's Saturday, June 25th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The context of white supremacy. We have about 3 minutes left. If you have anything you all want to share in 3 minutes, any of the folks who are on the line, you can press *8. I, again, just wanted to see the letters that she read from the victims. Did you all, any of the folks that are on the line, did you all hear those?
Yes, I did.
I did.
It was troubling to me, the people who wrote their letters when they know they were about to be killed. And that is which was very, very disturbing to me. As well as that man that says, when his record, when he was getting ready to leave the service, and how they wrote his record up in such a way that left off a lot of his accomplishments, and practically threatened the man with putting him in jail if he did not shut up and go sit in the corner. I only have to think of instances like that in order to discourage me from ever wanting to get into a relationship with someone white. Because when I look back and see what my ancestors have done, as you mentioned, where the people would come in one day, you in your house, and the sheriff is there and toss you out on the street, and a bunch of white folks walk into the house and it's theirs. They take over your place, and you have nowhere else to go and make a complaint. You're out of your home and your land. They've done the same thing here in Georgia, in Forsyth, Georgia, where they ran out lots of black people. They lost their land and everything. The white people ran them out. Some of those families are going back now trying to reclaim with their deeds and trying to get their property back.
Elliot Jaspin, he was on the program in July of last year. He talked about that in his book, Racial Cleansing, or Buried in Bitter Waters. That's it, Buried in the Bitter Waters. The history of racial cleansings in America. But he has a lot of details about what happened in Forsyth, Georgia, and white terrorism.
Well, people need to remember those things, and the problem is we don't teach our children our history. So therefore, by going to school and sitting next to these people, and they feel, okay, everything is great, we can have friends. We can sleep over at each other's houses. Everything is fine. So why not go ahead and marry them? But I always said the income stream flows one way. It always flows towards white, because look at Tiger Woods. I always bring that in Synopsis. I look at Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods' wife will be in a much better position 3 generations from now than Tiger Woods, because now he can't even play the game. He's probably going to retire before he could accomplish everything he wanted to do, all the records he wanted to break, because now it's like he has lost focus. And it was all done by a white woman.
Women, plural.
In his case, it's white women, because that's all he was fooling around with one white woman on another. She divorced him, took $600 million, or how much she allegedly took from him. She will invest it properly, and she will have more money than he would probably have 3 generations from now. So all she did was babysit for a living, and now she's very wealthy.
I suspect she will be reinvesting those funds in the system, refinement, maintenance of white supremacy. We will be back tomorrow. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cows signing out.